Welcome to the Korean Man and Black Woman Tales. The Korean Man and Black Woman Tales channel will bring you stories of strong bonds, cultural differences, passionate love, and unforgettable dramatic events. If you love interracial love stories and cinematic storytelling, then this is the place for you. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I chose the Empire, and that is the moment everything I loved began to die. My mother did not raise her voice when she gave me the ultimatum. She did not need to. Her silence carried more weight than any threat I had ever heard in my life. We stood across from each other in the main hall of our Seoul estate, marble floors cold beneath my shoes, the city glowing beneath us like something we owned. She looked at me the way she looks at a problem that needs to be erased. Then she said it calm and final. Choose. The Empire or the woman. No hesitation. No negotiation. Just a line drawn in blood. I remember the exact second my chest tightened, not from fear, but from something worse. Recognition. I already knew what I was going to say. I had been raised for this. Built for this. Conditioned to understand that love is weakness, and weakness gets you buried. So I chose the Empire. I did not even say her name when I made that choice. Let that sink in. The most important person in my life reduced to silence in a room where power mattered more than truth. My mother gave a small nod, satisfied, like a queen watching her heir finally act like a king. And just like that, it was done. Or at least, that is what I thought. Because 3 hours later, Simone disappeared. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. She was independent. Unpredictable. She hated being controlled, even by me. But then her phone went dark. Not off. Erased. Her apartment in San Francisco was untouched, almost too clean, like someone had wiped her out of existence with surgical precision. There was no sign of struggle. No broken glass. No forced entry. Just one thing that did not belong. A faint smear of blood on the edge of her kitchen counter. Small enough that most people would miss it, but I do not miss details. Not ever. My pulse slowed instead of racing. That is what happens when you grow up in my world. Panic is a luxury. You learn to observe first, feel later. But something inside me cracked anyway. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet fracture that spread through my chest like ice. I replayed the moment in Seoul over and over again. The choice. The look in my mother's eyes. The timing. You see it, do you not? This was never about giving me a choice. This was about making an example. Simone was never meant to walk away from this. And the worst part, I helped them. I made it easier. Because I chose power over her. And now the only person who ever looked at me like I was more than a weapon is gone. So tell me this. If you had everything in the world, every resource, every ounce of power, but the one person who made it mean something vanished because of your decision, would you still call that winning? Or would you finally understand what I did far too late? I met Simone Reed on a day I was not supposed to be myself. San Francisco was meant to be just another checkpoint in my network, another city under quiet influence, another place where people smiled at me because they feared what stood behind my name. But that afternoon, I walked into a small bookstore near the harbor wearing nothing that signaled power. No security. No tailored suit. No shadow trailing behind me. Just a man trying, for once, to exist without the weight of an empire pressing on his spine. She was standing on a ladder, reaching for a book that was just out of reach, muttering to herself like the world had forgotten to cooperate with her plans. I remember the exact sound of her voice before I even saw her face. Frustrated. Sharp. Alive. When the ladder shifted slightly, I moved without thinking and steadied it with one hand. She looked down at me, not startled, not grateful, just mildly annoyed that I had intervened. Then she said something no one had ever said to me before. I had it handled, you know. That was Simone. No fear. No performance. No calculation. Just truth, raw and unfiltered. I should have walked away. That would have been the intelligent move. Clean. Controlled. Safe. But I did not. I stayed. We argued about the book she was trying to reach. I told her it was overrated. She told me I was probably the type of man who only read things that made him feel important. I laughed genuinely, and that alone should have warned me. Men like me do not laugh unless something dangerous is happening. Over the next few weeks, I kept finding reasons to return to that bookstore. I told myself it was curiosity, that I was studying her, trying to understand why she did not react the way everyone else did. But the truth was simpler and far more dangerous. I liked the way she saw the world, And I liked the way she refused to see me as anything more than a man standing in front of her. Simone worked 2 jobs, refused help, paid her own rent, and made it very clear that she did not need saving. When I offered to fix a problem for her, something minor, something that would have taken me 1 phone call, she looked at me like I had insulted her. I do not need your power. I need you to respect that I can handle my own life. Let that sink in. No one had ever rejected what I could offer before. People begged for access to what I controlled. She turned it down without hesitation. That was the moment I realized I was already too far in. So I made a decision that went against every rule I had ever lived by. I lied. Not in words, but in omission. I did not tell her who I was. I became someone simpler. Someone smaller. I met her for late dinners, walked her home without a convoy trailing behind us, listened to her talk about her past, her family, the battles she fought alone and survived without anyone like me stepping in. For the first time in my life, I experienced something that felt dangerously close to peace. But peace does not exist in my world. It only visits briefly before it is hunted down. The first sign came quietly. A car that lingered too long on her street. A man who pretended to check his phone but never stopped watching her reflection in the glass. I noticed it immediately. She did not. Or maybe she did and chose not to care. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off. People look. That is what they do. But people in my world do not just look. They calculate. They wait. Then her email was compromised. Small things at first. Password resets she did not request. Files accessed at odd hours. I tightened security around her without telling her, rerouting threats, shutting down anything that came too close. I told myself I was protecting her. The truth was, I was trying to control something that refused to be controlled. And Simone felt it. You can always tell when someone like her starts to sense the cage forming around her. She pulled back, not dramatically, just enough to create distance. Then one night, standing outside her apartment, she looked at me with a kind of clarity that made it impossible to hide behind anything. You are not who you say you are you? I did not answer. That was my mistake. Silence is confirmation when the truth is already standing in the room. She stepped closer, searching my face, not afraid, just tired. I do not need protection from ghosts I cannot see. I need honesty from the man standing in front of me. That was the moment everything could have changed. I could have told her. I could have burned the lie to the ground and chosen something real. But I hesitated, because telling her the truth meant bringing her into a world that destroys anything it touches. And not telling her meant losing her anyway. I thought I still had time to decide. I was wrong, because somewhere far away, in a place built on power and blood, my family had already started watching her, and in their eyes, Simone Reed was not a person. She was a threat that needed to be removed. The ultimatum did not come as a surprise. In my world, nothing truly does. It arrived the way everything important always arrives, quietly, without warning, and impossible to ignore. I was called back to Seoul under the pretense of a routine council meeting. But the moment I stepped into the private chamber, I knew this was not routine. The air felt heavier, the silence sharper. Every pair of eyes in that room already knew something I had not yet been forced to say out loud. My mother sat at the head of the table, composed as always, her hands folded like she was about to sign a contract instead of dismantle a part of my life. Around her, the inner circle watched me with that same calculating stillness I had learned to mirror since childhood. No one spoke until I took my seat. Then she began. "There is a problem," she said, as if Simone were a minor inconvenience instead of the only person who had ever made me question the structure of everything I was built to protect. She did not say Simone's name at first. She referred to her as an external variable, a disruption, a liability. Let that sink in. The woman I could not stop thinking about reduced to a term used in risk assessment. I kept my expression neutral, but inside something tightened. I asked one question. "What exactly are you implying?" My mother's gaze did not waver. "I am not implying anything. I am giving you clarity." She slid a file across the table. Inside were photos. Simone walking home. Simone at work. Simone laughing with someone I did not recognize. Surveillance, detailed and precise. They had been watching her longer than I realized. Longer than I allowed myself to believe. "You let this go too far," she continued. "You allowed emotion to interfere with judgment. That ends now." I felt the shift in the room. Not aggressive. Not loud. Just absolute. This was not a discussion. This was a verdict waiting for confirmation. I closed the file slowly, buying time I did not have. What happens if I refuse? A dangerous question, but necessary. My mother leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping just enough to make every word land harder. Then you will no longer be in a position to refuse anything. The message was clear. My position, my authority, everything I had spent years consolidating could disappear overnight. Not because I was weak, but because I would be seen as compromised. And in our world, compromised leaders do not survive. I left the room without giving them an answer, but the decision followed me like a shadow. Back in San Francisco, I tried to move faster than the pressure closing in around me. I increased security around Simone, quietly, without her consent. I rerouted potential threats, cut off channels my family could use, built walls she never asked for. And she felt it immediately. You can always tell when someone like her senses control tightening around her life. She confronted me 2 nights later, standing in the doorway of her apartment, arms crossed, eyes locked on mine with a kind of frustration that cut deeper than anger. What are you doing? I tried to deflect, but she did not let me. You think I do not notice? The cars. The changes. The way you look over your shoulder like something is always coming. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. You are bringing something into my life that I did not choose. And I need to know what it is. That was the moment. The exact moment I could have told her everything. I could have chosen her right then. Walked away. Burned the empire to the ground if I had to. But instead, I hesitated again. Because walking away is not as simple as it sounds when your entire existence has been built inside something that does not let you leave. I told myself I just needed more time. One more day. One more move. One more plan to keep both worlds intact. That illusion shattered when my mother called me directly. No intermediaries. No distance. Her voice came through the line calm and final. This is your last opportunity to demonstrate loyalty. The council is prepared to act if you are not. I asked her one question. What have you already done? There was a pause, brief but heavy. Enough to confirm what I already feared. Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be, she replied. That was it. No denial. No reassurance. Just a warning wrapped in control. I understood then that I was already behind. Whatever line I thought I was walking, they had already crossed it. I went to Simone immediately, urgency replacing every excuse I had been hiding behind. She opened the door, took one look at my face, and knew something had shifted. You are scaring me, she said, not because she was weak, but because she could feel the truth closing in. I stepped inside, the words finally pushing to the surface, ready to break through everything I had held back. But when I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw exactly what telling her would do. It would drag her into a war she did not choose. It would make her a target in a way she could never escape. And in that moment, I made the decision that would destroy both of us. I chose the Empire. Not because I did not care about her, but because I believed I could protect her better by cutting her out of my world completely. I told her it was over. Cold. Clean. Final. I watched the confusion hit first, then the realization, then something deeper, something that looked like betrayal settling into her bones. You do not get to decide my life for me, she said, her voice shaking but controlled. But I already had. I turned away before I could take it back. Before I could admit that I was lying to both of us. And as I walked out that door, I told myself I had just saved her. I did not know I had just handed her over. The truth did not arrive all at once. It came in fragments, each one sharper than the last, each one cutting deeper into the illusion I had been clinging to. At first, I convinced myself that Simone leaving was exactly what I had intended. That distance meant safety. That silence meant she had escaped the reach of my world. But something about it felt wrong. Too clean. Too quiet. Simone did not disappear. She confronted. She fought. She demanded answers. So when she vanished without a trace, every instinct I had spent a lifetime sharpening began to scream. I went back to her apartment in San Francisco, not as the man she knew, but as who I really was. This time, I did not come alone. My people swept the building, every hallway, every camera feed, every access point. Nothing. No forced entry. No witnesses. No digital trail. It was as if she had been erased with intention. Precision. That was the word that stayed with me. This was not random. This was professional. And there was only one group capable of executing something that clean within my territory. My family. I accessed internal logs that were never meant to be touched without authorization. Black channels. Off-grid operations. The kind of data that does not exist unless you know exactly where to look. At first, there was nothing tied directly to her name. That was expected. They were not careless. But patterns always exist if you know how to read them. A temporary team deployed in San Francisco 3 days before I left Seoul. Unregistered assets. No official objective listed. A financial transfer routed through a shell account I recognized as belonging to my cousin Miho. That was when the cold realization settled in. This was not a reaction to my decision. This was already in motion before I ever spoke in that room. Let that sink in. I thought I was making a choice. In reality, the outcome had already been decided. Simone was marked the moment my family saw her as a variable they could not control. I tracked the team. Not through official reports, but through the mistakes people always make when they believe they are invisible. A security camera in a parking structure that had not been wiped properly. A license plate reflection in a storefront window. A timestamp that did not align with the fabricated timeline. Piece by piece, I rebuilt what they had done. They approached her outside her apartment. No struggle recorded, which meant they used something fast. Chemical. Clean. She was taken, not killed. That detail mattered. Because my family does not leave loose ends, but they also do not destroy assets without extracting value first. That meant she was still alive, at least for a time. I found the location they used as a temporary holding site. An abandoned logistics warehouse near the docks, one of many properties tied to our network through layers of ownership. When I arrived, it was already cleared out. No people. No equipment. Just the echo of something that had happened and been erased. But not perfectly. There were marks. Subtle, but there. A scuff on the concrete floor. A restraint bolt slightly misaligned. And blood. Not much, but enough. Fresh enough that I knew I was close. Simone had fought. Of course she had. The image formed in my mind whether I wanted it or not. Her refusing to go quietly. Her resisting men trained to overpower without hesitation. And then I saw something else. A broken piece of plastic, small, almost insignificant. Part of a zip restraint. Snapped, not cut. That changed everything. She did not just fight. She broke free. I closed my eyes for a second, not in relief, but in something more dangerous. Pride mixed with fear. If she escaped, then she was on the run. And if she was on the run, then my family would not stop. They would escalate. They always do. I pulled every resource I had, ignoring protocol, ignoring consequence. Surveillance grids lit up. Contacts activated. Networks that had been dormant for years came alive under one directive. Find her before they do. And then the message came. Not through official channels. Not through anything secure. A simple video file sent to a private line that almost no one had access to. I opened it immediately. The footage was shaky, recorded on what looked like a disposable device. Simone stood in frame, her face pale, a cut along her temple, her breathing controlled but strained. She was alone. No visible captor. No obvious threat in the frame. But her eyes. That was what hit me. She was not afraid. She was calculating. The same way I had seen her look when she was solving a problem, when she refused to let anything define her. She looked directly into the camera, like she knew I would be the one watching. "Do not come for me," she said, her voice steady despite everything. That was it. No explanation. No plea. Just a warning. The video cut out. I replayed it 3 times, searching for anything hidden in the background. A sound. A reflection. A clue. But all I found was the undeniable truth settling into my chest. She was still out there. Alive. Running. And she did not want me to find her. That should have stopped me. In any other situation, I would have respected that boundary. But this was not any other situation. Because the people hunting her were not strangers. They were mine. And the moment that realization fully locked into place, something inside me shifted beyond repair. I was not going to negotiate. I was not going to ask permission. I was not going to pretend there was still a system worth protecting. I walked into the next council meeting without waiting to be called, without announcing my presence. The room went silent as every head turned toward me. My mother did not look surprised. She never does. I placed the evidence on the table, every detail I had uncovered, every piece of proof they thought they had buried. Then I looked directly at her and spoke with a clarity I had never allowed myself before. This ends now. There was a pause, brief but charged, as if the entire structure of power we had built together was holding its breath. My mother tilted her head slightly, studying me, measuring the shift in my tone, the absence of hesitation. "You are making a mistake," she said quietly. I shook my head once. "No, I already made one. And now I am correcting it." That was the moment the line was drawn. Not between me and an external enemy, but between me and the people who created me. War does not always start with violence. Sometimes it begins with a single decision that cannot be undone. And I had just made mine. I destroyed the empire the same way it was built, quietly, precisely, without leaving room for recovery. There was no dramatic explosion, no public collapse, just a sequence of decisions that cut through its foundation one layer at a time. I froze accounts that were never supposed to be touched, redirected shipments that kept entire operations alive, exposed internal fractures that had been carefully hidden for decades. People who once stood behind my mother began to question her. Not out of loyalty to me, but out of fear for their own survival. That is how power shifts in our world. Not through emotion, but through inevitability. I watched it unfold with a clarity that felt almost detached, like I was observing someone else dismantle everything I had spent my life protecting. My mother called me in for one final conversation. No counsel, no audience. Just the two of us, standing in the same hall where she had given me the choice that started all of this. She looked exactly the same. Composed. Untouched. As if nothing I had done had truly reached her. "You are willing to burn everything for a woman who chose to walk away from you," she said, her voice steady, almost curious. I held her gaze without hesitation this time. "No, I am willing to burn everything because you decided she did not deserve to exist in it." That was the difference she refused to acknowledge. To her, Simone was a variable. To me, she was the only thing that had ever made this life feel like more than a calculated series of moves. My mother studied me for a moment longer, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not approval. Recognition. "You were always meant to lead," she said. "I just did not expect it to happen like this." There was no apology. There never would be. In her mind, she had done what was necessary. And maybe, in the world she built, she was right. But I was done living inside that logic. Within weeks, the structure we had maintained began to fracture beyond repair. Alliances dissolved. Rivals moved in. The empire did not collapse overnight, but it was no longer untouchable. And for the first time in my life, I stepped away from it willingly. No title. No protection. No certainty of what came next. Just one objective that outweighed everything else. Find Simone. I traced every lead, followed every possibility, pushed every contact until there was nothing left to uncover. Cities blurred together. Names led to dead ends. Every path I took arrived at the same conclusion. She was gone. Not taken. Not hiding in fear. Gone by choice. She had erased herself from a world that tried to control her, including me. Let that sink in. After everything, after the war I started, after the empire I dismantled, the one thing I wanted was the one thing I could not reclaim. I stood alone in a city that once felt like a piece of my territory, now just another place that did not hold her. The silence was different this time. Not strategic. Not controlled. Just empty. People would say I won. That I proved my strength by turning against my own blood and surviving. But they would be wrong. Because power without purpose is just noise, and victory without someone to share it with is just another form of loss. I had everything. Then I chose the empire. Then I destroyed it. And in the end, I am left with nothing that matters. I won the war. But I lost the only person who ever saw me without the crown. So tell me this. If you knew how it would end, would you still choose power? Or would you choose the one thing that makes it worth having? I used to believe power was everything. That if I controlled enough, owned enough, ruled enough, I would never lose. But no one teaches you what happens when the one person who saw you as human walks away from all of it. No deals. No revenge. No goodbye. Just silence. And that silence? It echoes louder than any empire ever could. So if this story made you feel something, if it made you question what truly matters when everything is on the line, then stay with me. Hit like if you believe power means nothing without the right person beside you. Subscribe if you want more stories where justice is not clean and choices come with real consequences. And tell me in the comments, would you choose the empire or her?